The sun hung low in the sky as Alaska Airlines Flight 261 soared above the shimmering waters of the Pacific. It was January 31st, 2000, and what should have been a routine flight from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, to Seattle, Washington, had already encountered unexpected challenges. Pilots Ted Thompson and William Bill Tansky, both experienced aviators, had sensed something off early into the flight. The plane's horizontal stabilizer, a crucial component that controlled pitch, was showing signs of trouble. But with years of experience under their belts, they remained calm, checking their instruments, running diagnostics, and communicating with maintenance control. The McDonnell Douglas MD-83 had served Alaska Airlines reliably for years, but today, something wasn't right. A persistent issue with the jackscrew assembly, which controlled the stabilizer, had been noted on previous flights, but no immediate action had been taken. Now, as they cruised at 31,000 feet, the pilots attempted to correct what seemed like a frozen stabilizer. They worked together, methodically trying to regain control. The problem was worsening, but they still believed they had time. The sudden dive then, it happened. A sudden and violent pitch-down movement sent the aircraft plummeting nose first towards the vast Pacific Ocean below. In an instant, passengers who had been chatting, reading, or dozing off were thrown against their seats, screams filling the cabin as the aircraft's downward acceleration defied gravity. The force of negative G's lifted those unbuckled from their seats momentarily into the air. In the cockpit, Thompson and Tansky fought desperately with the controls, struggling against the plane's relentless descent. We're in a dive. Here, Thompson's voice crackled over the radio to air traffic control. Controllers at the Los Angeles Center could only listen, powerless, as the aircraft continued its terrifying drop. The pilots, gripping their controls tightly, applied back pressure on the yoke with all their strength. Miraculously, the plane responded, leveling off around 24,000 feet. For a brief moment, there was silence. The crew radioed in, reporting the severity of the stabilizer problem. "We are in a pinch here," Captain Thompson reported, his voice strained. The plane had miraculously recovered from the dive, but they knew it was only temporary. They had to get to Los Angeles, fast. The aircraft was wounded, unstable, and at the mercy of a system that was failing them. The final moment's desperation now set in. Flight attendants, though shaken, tried to calm the passengers, reassuring them that they were heading to safety. In the cockpit, Thompson and Tansky made the critical decision to divert to Los Angeles International Airport, LAX. They manually adjusted the aircraft's power and flaps, doing everything they could to maintain stability. But then, without warning, the stabilizer completely failed. The MD-83 pitched down aggressively, even worse than before. This was no longer just a malfunction. The jackscrew assembly had catastrophically separated, leaving the plane uncontrollable. The aircraft went into an inverted dive, rolling completely upside down before beginning its final descent. Passengers, helpless, braced for impact. The ocean below rushed toward them at unimaginable speed. "Mayday, mayday, we are inverted. Alaska 261. The pilots' voices, still filled with determination, echoed in the cabin. They fought until the very last second, but the battle was over. At 4:22 p.m., Alaska Airlines Flight 261 impacted the Pacific Ocean, 14 miles off the coast of California, at over 400 miles per hour. The force of the crash shattered the aircraft instantly, sending debris scattering across the surface. There were no survivors. Aftermath and investigation news of the crash spread rapidly. Search and rescue teams arrived swiftly, but the reality was grim. Floating debris, life vests, and luggage were all that remained of Flight 261. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, launched an extensive investigation, determined to find the cause of this horrifying tragedy. It didn't take long for investigators to uncover the true culprit: a lack of proper maintenance on the jackscrew assembly. The grease lubrication on the jackscrew had worn down over time, leading to excessive wear on the threads. With no grease, To protect it, the threads had finally stripped away completely, causing the stabilizer to fail catastrophically. The revelation was chilling. This was a preventable accident. Alaska Airlines maintenance procedures were scrutinized, and new regulations were put in place to ensure proper jack-screw lubrication and inspection across all aircraft. The tragedy of Flight 261 became a harrowing lesson in aviation safety, forever changing maintenance protocols worldwide. Though the flight had ended in devastation, the story of the crew's heroic efforts lived on. They had fought relentlessly to save their passengers, never giving up, even in the face of an impossible situation. Their bravery, their composure, and their sheer determination in those final moments would always be remembered. Alaska 261 was lost, but it was never forgotten. The day was clear, the sky a vast canvas of blue as Alaska Airlines Flight 261 made its way north, tracing a route over the shimmering Pacific. On board, 88 souls, passengers and crew alike, were settled in for what was meant to be a routine journey. Some were heading home, others were off to new destinations, unaware that the flight was about to turn into an unimaginable struggle for survival. In the cockpit, Captain Ted Thompson and First Officer Bill Tansky monitored the controls with sharp focus. The aircraft, a McDonnell Douglas MD-83, had a known issue, a persistent problem with its horizontal stabilizer. They had noticed something strange shortly after takeoff. The stabilizer was not responding properly, seemingly locked in place. Thompson and Tansky, both seasoned pilots, attempted manual corrections, but nothing seemed to work. They communicated their concerns to maintenance control, but the situation had yet to escalate. They still had time, or so they thought. A descent into chaos. Then with terrifying suddenness, the nose of the aircraft pitched downward. It was as if some invisible force had yanked the aircraft toward the sea. In the cabin, passengers screamed in shock, their bodies lifting momentarily from their seats before their belts yanked them back down. Flight attendants struggled to stay, on their feet gripping the backs of seats as the aircraft lurched violently. In the cockpit, alarms blared aggressively. Thompson and Tansky fought against the controls, pulling back on the yoke with all their strength, attempting to arrest the descent. 7,000 feet lost in seconds. The ocean below seemed to rush toward them. "This is Alaska 261. We're in a dive." Thompson's voice rang out over the radio. Air traffic controllers listened in horror. The aircraft had plummeted from 31,000 feet to 24,000 feet in mere moments. Then, against all odds, the pilots managed to stabilize it. The plane leveled off. The cabin settled into an uneasy calm, but everyone on board knew this was far from over. The battle to stay in the air for a moment, hope flickered. The pilots coordinated with Los Angeles Center, requesting emergency clearance to land at LAX. They prepared for an immediate diversion, knowing that whatever was failing them might not last much longer. Then, the stabilizer failed completely. The nose pitched down again, harder than before. This time it was uncontrollable. The aircraft rolled nearly inverted, the wings dipping as it spiraled downward. Passengers clutched their armrests, their eyes filled with terror. Some prayed, others screamed. Flight attendants shouted commands, desperately trying to maintain calm as gravity warped their sense of direction. "Mayday! Mayday! We are inverted! Alaska 261. Thompson's voice was urgent, unrelenting. The pilots fought to recover, using every ounce of their skill and strength. They applied maximum force on the control yoke, struggling against an aircraft that no longer responded. The ocean loomed closer, a vast, unyielding expanse beneath them. Impact in the final moments, the pilots never stopped fighting. They worked in perfect synchronization, hoping for a miracle. But the forces against them were too great. The aircraft, now in a near vertical dive, hurtled toward the Pacific at an unimaginable speed. At 4:22 p.m., Flight 261 impacted the water at over 400 miles per hour. The force of the crash was absolute, an explosive impact that sent debris scattering across the waves. The sea swallowed the wreckage within moments. Silence followed. The only trace of Flight 261 was a debris field stretching across the water, a somber testament to the tragedy that had unfolded in the sky. Lessons learned. Search and rescue teams arrived swiftly, but there were no survivors. The investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, uncovered the grim truth. A failure in maintenance had sealed the fate of Flight 261. The jack screw, which controlled the stabilizer, had been worn down due to a lack of proper lubrication. The damage had been visible long before, but necessary action had not been taken. This tragedy forced major changes in aircraft maintenance protocols worldwide. Airlines revised their inspection procedures, ensuring that such a critical failure would never be ignored again. The loss of 88 lives could not be undone, but their story served as a warning, a reminder that even the smallest overlooked details in aviation can have catastrophic consequences. And through the efforts of their pilots, their final moments were not of surrender, but of unyielding resistance in the face of the impossible. Flight 261 may have been lost, but the lessons it left behind endure, etched into the very fabric of aviation safety forever.